Have you ever wondered if smartphones and social media are as wonderful for us as they are cracked up to be? Hi, I'm Rex Rogers, and this is episode number 185 of Discerning What is Best, a podcast applying unchanging biblical principles in a rapidly changing world and a Christian worldview to current issues and everyday life. For those of us over 30 years of age, the idea of a cell phone is still a tool of wonder. We can remember BCP, before cell phones. We can also remember BI, before Internet. While the Internet was used in academia during the 1980s, most of us didn't encounter it until the mid-1990s during the Clinton administration. I remember my first car phone in the 1990s. I remember cell phones first being shown on television shows in the 1980s, like Miami Vice, when Sonny Crockett would pick up a phone the size of a brick. If you're over 30, you remember all this. We remember we had a life back then. We communicated just differently. We researched information and learned just differently. We listened to music and radio just differently. But it is in the 2000s that internet and cell phones became foundations for what we now call smartphones. The smartphone hit the market in year 2007. This technological commercial tsunami launched what scholar Jonathan Haidt calls the Great Rewiring of Childhood, based upon a rapid introduction of new handheld techno-wizardry. His book, The Anxious Generation, How the Great Rewiring of Childhood is Causing an Epidemic of Mental Illness, tells a story of what happened to the generation born after 1995, popularly known as Gen Z, the generation that follows the millennials. Was embracing smartphones wise? Was it safe? No one knew. New York University professor Haidt noted, "We don't let kids buy tobacco or alcohol or go in casinos, but we ignored the harmful effects of the overuse of smartphone technology." American youth were handed a powerful new tool or toy that captured hours of their time each day, literally transformed how they thought and learned, engaged them with an unknown online set of contacts mislabeled a community, while disengaging them from family, friends, recreation, and the great outdoors, thus introducing a massive wave of social detachment. MIT professor Sherry Turkle described life with smartphones this way: "We are forever elsewhere." So not long after the new tech access, is it any wonder a global teenage mental health crisis exploded? The great rewiring via smartphones hit girls much harder than boys. The increased prevalence of posting images of oneself after smartphones added front-facing cameras in 2010 and Facebook acquired Instagram in 2012, boosting its popularity. This greatly expanded the number of adolescents posting carefully curated photos and videos of their lives for their peers and strangers, not just to see, but to judge. Interestingly, there was little sign of an impending mental health crisis among adolescents in the 2000s. Then quite suddenly, in the early 2010s, things changed. 2 mental health disorders skyrocketed among adolescents in the 2010s: anxiety and depression. For example, ER visits for self-harm increased 188% from 2010 to 2020 for girls, 48% for boys. Suicide rates increased 91% for boys and 167% for girls, 2010 to 2020. Between 2010 and 2015, the social lives of American teens moved largely onto smartphones with continuous access to social media, online video games, and other internet-based activities. This great rewiring of childhood, Professor Haidt argues, is the single largest reason for the tidal wave of adolescent mental illness that began in the early 2010s. The sheer amount of time that adolescents spend with their phones is staggering. Studies of time use routinely find that the average teen reports spending more than 7 hours a day on screen-based leisure activities, not including school and homework. This results in social deprivation, less time with real human contact, sleep deprivation, yielding depression, anxiety, irritability, cognition deficits, poor learning, lower grades, and more accidents, and more deaths from accidents. Then attention fragmentation, not able to focus and stay on task. And finally, addiction, with social media companies using behaviorist techniques to hook youth into being heavy users. From Professor Haidt, a social psychologist's point of view, social media is a trap that ensnares more girls than boys. It lures people in with the promise of connection and communion, but then it multiplies the number of relationships while reducing their quality, therefore making it harder to spend time with a few close friends in real life. This may be why loneliness spiked so sharply among girls in the early 2010s, while for boys the rise was more gradual. It makes girls more vulnerable to stalking, or boys in their school pressuring them to share nude photographs of themselves. It makes boys more vulnerable to cyberbullying and pornography. Where does religion, if not biblical Christianity, fit in this smartphone social media great rewiring? Soon before his death in 1662, the French philosopher Blaise Pascal wrote a paragraph often paraphrased as there is a God-shaped hole in every human heart. The scholar-author Jonathan Haidt states that he agrees with Pascal, but in an earlier book, Professor Haidt tried to explain the source of this God-shaped hole in the human heart by drawing on Darwinian evolutionary theory. He says, many of my religious friends disagree about the origin of our God-shaped hole. They believe that the hole is there because we are God's creations and we long for our Creator. But although we disagree about its origins, we agree about its implications. There is a hole, an emptiness in us all that we strive to fill. If it doesn't get filled with something noble and elevated, modern society will quickly pump it full of garbage. That has been true since the beginning of the age of mass media, but the garbage pump got 100 times more powerful in the 2010s. It matters what we expose ourselves to. Religion, particularly Christianity, teaches us that to be slower to judge and quicker to forgive are good for maintaining relationships and improving mental health. Social media trains people to do the opposite. Judge quickly and publicly, lest you be judged for not judging whoever it is that we are all condemning today. Don't forgive, or your team will attack you as a traitor. From a spiritual perspective, social media is a disease of the mind. Spiritual practices and virtues such as forgiveness, grace, and love are a cure. Professor Haidt observes there is a God-shaped hole in every human heart, or at least many people feel a yearning for meaning, connection, and spiritual elevation. A phone-based life often fills the hole with trivial and degrading content. To combat the effects of the Great Rewiring, Professor Haidt concludes his seminal work with 4 foundational reforms or recommendations. No smartphones before high school. No social media before age 16. Phone-free schools at all levels. Far more unsupervised play and childhood independence. This is a scholarly book. It is thorough, well-documented, current, and loaded with common sense. Parents should heed the warnings and recommendations of this book, as should church groups and certainly all educational institutions. Well, we'll see you again soon. This podcast is about discerning what is best. If you find this thought-provoking and helpful, follow us on your favorite podcast platform. Download an episode for your friends. And for more Christian commentary, check my website, REXM as in Martin. That's rexmrogers.com. Or check my YouTube channel at Dr. Rex Rogers for more podcasts and video. And remember, it is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm.